I've asked both of them to make just a couple of opening statements to that question about their perspective on the prison to work or neighborhood to prison pipeline, and then we'll open it up for questions.
At the age of 16, went to prison for murder. Went to the MDOC at the age of 18. Went to Michigan Reformatory, which is supposed to be one of the worst places for kids, right, in prison. Back in 92. In 93, I enrolled in Mount Common Community College there. Made the dean's list twice. Eventually got in more trouble, ended up in the worst place than there. But I tried to stay focused on education and trades and all that kind of stuff, so I spent a lot of my money, just buying books, just about anything, Some of it was religious, some of it was not religious, just learning and absorbing everything that I can absorb. Eventually, I ended up in Muskegon, where I met Professor DeWilde at the Community Working Classic program, and was lucky enough to get accepted into that program, and he said I did exceptionally well.
It's true.
So, then I got out in 2009, and I was released for about 20 months, and I ended up, me and my wife got in an argument. I went to another location, and 30 days after being basically kicked out of my own house, I got rearrested for possession of a handgun that was found in the oven at the apartment that I was staying at. And returned, I was supposed to return for 2 years, and it turned into 6 years. And I've been out maybe 5 months now. So right now it's just a lot of work, a lot of catching up, a lot of, regrets, and a lot of, retrospective understanding that, one bad decision led to a series of bad decisions, from other people. And it was seen that it's minuscule at the beginning, but, that slippery slope would just continue to go downhill eventually. But now I'm back out here, working. I hit another slippery slope when I shot myself in the hand with a nail gun while at work. And so I've been off work getting workman's comp for like probably 4 months right now. And I think that's like it's sort of like an ego shock to me, because I consider myself a hard worker. So I went from just having a small hole from a 3/4 inch ring shaped nail to it got infected and they had to cut the muscle away and the scar tissue and all that kind of stuff. So I'm considered handicapped, but I'm not going to say that, right? But it's that's mostly what I'm going through right now. I mean, I get lucky and, get to meet guys like you and women like you. And I also get unlucky and get to meet people on the other side of the education system. So that's about where I'm at in my life right now. Just moved into a home probably the beginning of this week, and getting the roof repaired and all that kind of stuff, on workman's comp. That's pretty tight. And I think the first major thing I bought was a Vizio television yesterday, and I tried to be cheap and ordered an open box and didn't have a remote control, so I got mad last night. It's a slippery slope, all kind of thing. But that's where I'm at in my life. I think I'm doing okay, and I'm pleased to be here to meet you guys today.
Well, wow, that's a kind of a tough act to follow, but obviously at the other end, our biggest involvement, first of all, we're glad to be here and hear about social entrepreneurship. I think that's a wonderful thing. I assume that the group has heard of Ashoka, that organization, but there's a whole movement dedicated to people using these kinds of skills to get things done, which is what excites me. My biggest involvement was in a group called 70 times 7 in Holland. And actually the story behind that sounds very appropriate in view of Markieth's the story that he just told, which is their mission is to, one way they've put it is to work with alumni of some of our major state institutions, other institutions, alumni, and kind of increase the time between reunions. Okay, kind of get that here. In other words, you can kind of relate to that. In other words, make it so that people don't end up going back. And there's a lot of motivations that you can get to that. If by coincidence, just yesterday I was speaking with a group of about 25, a future ministers for Western Theological Seminary who do a distance learning and then will spend a couple weeks a year on campus. And I addressed them, and we talked about this a little bit. So when you're talking to future ministers, you can use a religious motivation because it's clearly this is the kind of thing we're supposed to do. In whatever religion you might go to, they're always going to say to help the less fortunate, and so you got that. But when speaking to a business group, I can say that you can be kind of a selfish business owner who doesn't even like people, and believe that either we help people that are getting we use the term prison reentry as opposed to prison reentry system, programs and prison reentry system. You can be in favor of that just from completely selfish programs, because as a state of Michigan, we're spending more money on prisons than we are on higher education, which is why the state pays about 17% or so of what it costs to Grand Valley, and 15 or 20 years ago, they were paying 70%. So, so that's not working out so great. And so I said, either we stop pounding on people that, while they're in and after they're out through a bit of, Ottawa County, not only you're in a prison, not a county jail, but if you're in a county jail, most people don't know that they charge you as if you're in a hotel, like $50 some odd a day. And when you get out, and so it's one thing if you're in a deal, drunk and disorderly over the weekend, and you got $150 or something else like that, but you're in for 6 months and come out with $9,000, and you've already lost your car, and you're gonna have a hard time getting a job. Now you have a judgment against you for that kind of money, so you can't borrow any. So either we help people get back on track, or you may as well just make every sentence life and just keep building more jails. And and you can get to a motivation that that's a bad idea without even caring at all about people. Now, I can just say, as a business person who's been very fortunate in having some success, and you make a great deal and you feel great, but I can just tell you that for an awful lot of people, certainly myself included, when you feel you've made that connection, made a difference for one person that would have been off track and gotten back on, the satisfactions of doing that are immense. And you don't have to save the whole, nothing in the biblically or no, you don't have to do everything. But just because you can't do everything doesn't mean you shouldn't do anything. Any one thing that you do can be deeply satisfying and the kind of thing that will stay with you far longer than any great buy low, sell high deal that you think you made in business. So that's kind of our motivation. One thing, we also speak to graduate schools, and people say, well, it's all nice for you, you're at this point in life, you can go preach and whatever it is, but what about me? And I guess the point is to start wherever you are. And for example, if you're in a company today, there's a lot of online applications for jobs, and it's very efficient. It can be a very efficient way, but it can result in a flood of applications. So if your company where you're working has an online application, and if they have a question of have you ever been convicted of a felony, and if you answer yes, many of these are programmed so that no human being will ever see your application. I mean, you're just boom, done, no shot. Well, that doesn't have to be. There's a lot of reasons why that's a bad idea, and just getting rid of all the ethical, because Michael will cover that another time. This is the kind when businesses do that. I would consider that abusive. And then when a part depending on the politics of the day, they get. They'll end up with regulations that say you're not allowed to ask that question. I mean, that there's already stop the box, or there's movements for that kind of thing. Well, I think that a business should. I don't particularly like being told what to do by the government but without a good reason. And there are plenty of good reasons, so I'm not opposed to regulations. But I think I should be able to know, and I would if I'm. Excuse me, and I should be able to know, but then I need to act responsibly with that information, figure out where's the right spot to use it. So one reason not to do that is fear of regulation. Is not fear, but I mean just by doing the right thing, don't bring on legislation that often goes it's overboard in telling you what to do. But there's also, it's a pool of talent. I mean, just to listen to this guy, he probably has a lot of talents, and if you give him a chance, it's probably, I'm not looking for, when we hire out of this pool, I'm not expecting to end up with average employees when I'm done. You know, I'm gonna get a higher proportion. I think I actually have the potential to get with, you know, by the time we get done, that of the people that we got, I'm gonna have a higher proportion of really good employees, you know, above average, than I might just get for the pool. Some of these people are gonna recognize that, you know, they reached out, they extended themselves for me. I'm gonna extend myself for them. They have something to prove. They got all these other kinds of things. So the thing about this 70 times 7, and just a couple more things about social entrepreneurship and about what was so incredibly clever about this thing, and it sounds like it's something, because this is the thing in Holland, is a very distinctive thing, and it is a faith, it's based with, it comes out of a faith-based organization. They need a lot of volunteers. They reach out to people while they're still in jail, and it was 6 months before they're gonna get out, and they form a relationship, so it's a mentoring relationship with a few, you know, 2 or 3 people, or one, I don't know, whatever many they, you know, they assign. But basically, in Ottawa County today, anybody who's coming out of jail and gonna be returning to Ottawa County can get a mentor assigned to them and get, you know, one of these attachment points. And then when they get out, that mentor is still there. And that relationship continues. So they've got a place to meet, a place to go to. They've got counseling, they got resources, they got training. They'll got help with transportation. They may be able to help with getting a car. You know, they can help you with a lot of stuff. They've also got other people in the same boat that you can meet with. And they started, which was a company called New Day Staffing. They started a temp agency. So the beauty of that is just like with any other temp agency, I can hire them, people in that way, and we work it out and see, is this gonna be a good fit, and, you know, either one can just say, you know, take a time out at any point, and without burning any bridges either way. And sometimes we can be a stepping stone to employment elsewhere, and sometimes it can be a stepping stone to, you know, a full-time job with us. So it's a very, very good program. Now, you may have heard of an organization called the Prison Ministries. Have anybody heard about Prison Ministries? Well, maybe most of
course
you
I have.
Yeah. Well, the Prison Ministries it's just as well if you have it, it's okay. You know, that's a good sign on average, okay. But Prison Ministries was started by a guy named Chuck Colson, who was a famous Watergate, in the Watergate, again, before you were all born, but for me it was a pretty big deal. And he was one of the, you know, Nixon's dirty trick henchmen, and he was a really smart, tough guy. He is a lawyer, he'd been a Marine. I met him personally because he came to Holland to see 70 times 7 to see how that was working out. And this guy, big tough guy as he was, had a religious experience at some point. And he said, they, you know, with Watergate, I didn't do half the stuff that they charged me with, but I did a lot of other stuff they never found out about, so it averaged out. And it was, I mean, very, very direct. But here's this big tough guy that had a religious experience. That inspired him to, you know, to bring, you know, religious teachings into the prison. And it's now it's in 35 countries. It's all, you know, it's all the thing. But even at that organization, they did a study after a number of years about recidivism, people that end up going back. And the difference between people who were really into that versus not into that was way less than they would have thought. Because how can the, you know, all this religious faith and all this, how can it be a bad thing? And the problem, what they came to figure out was that it was a prison ministry. And then once you were out of prison, you didn't have a ministry, you didn't have a community, you had nothing. I mean, now Blues Brothers was made as a movie before you were born, but you may have seen the reruns or something or other. And if you remember these guys getting out of Joliet, and they were given $20 in a little suitcase and out on the road to hitchhike someplace. You know, and that was, you know, that's an extreme case. I don't know.
Pretty close.
Let me get Markieth in.
Yeah, I'm just
to talk a little bit about that transition, both what you found,
Well,
what was helpful in terms of when you were in, and then a little bit about, so people get a sense of what the transition is like.
Well, the MDOC didn't offer me anything that I found helpful. I mean, because everything, I mean, it's just like life, you know. If you are not a self-motivator, you can choose in prison. Everything that's in society is in prison. Everything from weapons to drugs to, you know, prostitution, you know, even though, you know, that's another story. But it's just, whatever happens in society is also in prison, just a smaller, you have smaller portals of access. So, and the expense to market is, you know, like if you get an ounce of marijuana out here, 60 to 80 bucks in prison, that's like $700, $900. So you can get killed for, you know, 60 bucks really, right? So it's like, but if you're a person, just like in society, you have the religious groups, you got the intellectual groups, you have the, you know, Dungeons and Dragon groups or video game, whatever. Everyone finds their group, they just attract themselves to each other, right? And it's sort of like, if you're a self-motivator, you can motivate yourself to do what it is you need to do to prepare yourself for society, but I guarantee you probably 70% of prisoners don't do that, right? So you find a small percentage, maybe 5, that's seriously, you know, trying to get themselves better for society. And I think maybe another 10% that, you know, they just believe that their out date is too far away. So it's like, my transition this time was the worst. You know, it's not typical of a prisoner transition, but they didn't know that I was being released. I got sent to a program that was called VPP, which is Violence Prevention Program. And I hadn't had a violent incident in 15 years. But when I went back for the gun, which was nonviolent, they decided, well, okay, well, in 1991, right, we want you to take this VP. It was my second felony, right? So I'm not a good criminal every time I do something. I probably
Right, that's another reason.
But I went to this program, and the program lost its budget. Well, actually, I went to the learning site at Bellamy Creek first. And this was a program where they, you know, basically give you all the classes you need to get you ready for society. You was like 99.9% of guys was guaranteed parole. So I sat there for 2 years. I finished the program in the first year. So the last year I just was basically serving out my initial sentence, which was the 2 years. Well, October of 2012 or 13, they lost funding for the program. And I had already finished the program, so they sent these letters out. And the letter said, well, the program has been rescinded. It will be taken into consideration that you participated in the program, and you will see the parole board 5 to 8 months from your earliest release date. Well, I was like 3 months from being released. And it's like, you know, they say, well, one day they told me to pack up. I packed my stuff up and I got transferred to another facility. So when I got to that facility, the guy was like, oh, we get you guys down here all the time. We're just waiting on your paperwork. You'll be going home soon. Well, I didn't go home. They gave me a 36-month flop, which is a continuance. So for 3 years, you know, I had to stay there. I was a plus 17. The highest you can be is like a plus 18 to get parole. So according to the ledgers, I should have been paroled, but once human intervention comes in, it didn't happen. So I did 3 more years, always thinking that they were going to let me go because I seen other guys around me that, you know, molested children and done all kinds of stuff that we consider diabolical, getting out. And I'm just, well, something's wrong with this picture, right? So I did the 3 years, and then upon being released from the 3 years, they say, well, we want you to go and do this violent prevention program. So this is what society doesn't know, right? The books that say they released 30,000 prisoners in 1 year, right? But actually what happens is that the guys get a parole, so on the books you are actually paroled, you are considered released, but you actually get sent to another facility where you're doing your program. That programming was 45 days, but it took me 6 months to get into class. So I ended up doing another 6 months. So when you looked on the computer, it showed that I was paroled in Detroit, but I was really paroled to a prison in Detroit, right? So while there, it was a big dispute about the funding of the program. So now I'm just like, you know, violent prevention wasn't going to work for me now, right? 6 months in, now you guys are going to lose the funding. And I'm just like, I just went through this like 3 years ago, but we got into the last class and, you know, finished the last class, and it was all this politics about what day we were going to be released. Was it the 17th? Was it the 22nd? So it went back and forth, and finally they told everybody, okay, you guys are going home now. Well, I got on the bus, rode a Greyhound to Grand Rapids. I never rode a Greyhound before. I got off the Greyhound bus, and I'm sitting there like, okay, I was supposed to be here an hour ago, right? And, you know, everyone's coming by. Did you just get out of prison? I'm like, yeah. So finally I got the nerve enough to ask someone to use their telephone. And I called my mother like, are you coming to get me? She was like, well, I told your granddad to come and get you. Is he there? I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, he probably forgot. He's like 79 years old. So I'm sitting there, you know, with this big duffel bag in my guitar, because I was learning how to play the electric guitar. You know, an hour goes by, I'm looking at the Founder Bureau. I'm like, I wonder how those beers taste. You know. Finally pulls up, I get in the car, I say, well, I need to go and report, because you have to report 24 hours upon being released. So I get to the parole office, and I'm sitting there for like 2.5 hours. I'm just like, something's not right. And I see the lady behind the desk So I said, well, let me go find out what's going on. So I go back to the one, she, could you give me your name again? I give her my name. She gets on the computer. She says, when did you get out? I said, like 6 hours ago. She was like, well, according to the computer, you're still in prison. So I'm like, huh? She was like, yeah, it's like they never sent your paperwork saying that you were being released. So technically, in the computer, you're still in prison, so we're just trying to make sure you didn't escape. I said, well, if I didn't escape, I wouldn't have reported. Right? So what was weird and what society doesn't know is that I went to my parole office, and you know, he says, well, we didn't know you were getting out. Here's the pre-release sheet. He said, but you don't have a final release, and they were supposed to send me to public housing and, you know, have all of these, you know, vouchers, whatever, set up for me. Well, they didn't have any of that because the paperwork was never processed. So it's like, so he says, well, I have nothing for you. He was like, just sign this and sign that. He said, give me a call in 2 days and tell me where you're living. So I'm just like, if I didn't have any family, you know, I just would have been out. You know, like I told Professor DeWilde, I could have been in Mexico. I mean, if I was a killer or a rapist, I could have committed more crimes, and technically I'm in prison, so the MDOC would have been in trouble for it, right? So it's like, then I got out and, you know, I'm living here. I called my parolee and I said, well, I'm living here with my sister. He was like, well, I need to go and do a home visit. So he walks through the front door. He stands right there in the threshold. He was like, where are you sleeping? I'm like, there. They go, okay, just do the right thing, and, you know, walked off.
And you had to pay for that though, right?
Yeah, right now I'm $4,000 in debt.
No, but you had to pay for the parole office. You got to pay something for your.
Yeah, there's a $40 a month, but what happened is that the last time I got out of prison, they put me on this GPS monitor because they wanted to know where I was. So the first thing he did was hand me this bill saying you owe us $4,995. So I'm like, okay, well, I don't have a house, I don't have a car, I don't have a job yet, so this bill is like null and void as far as I'm concerned. So he's like, well, don't worry about that. That won't hold you up for your discharge. So they send me another letter. They say, well, if you pay this money, we may let you off early. So I study law. So whenever you use that may, I know it may not happen, right? So I'll just save this money, you know, if I ever came across it. But it's like, I had absolutely nothing. The only reason why I ended up with, Medicaid or Medicare, whatever it is that the MDOC, now because of the Obamacare, prisoners that get out, they have to have medical insurance, or the MDOC get penalized for it. So I ended up with a medical card for that. But I probably would never use it because I don't go to the hospital for, work related, right? But it's like, that's the only way I ended up with that. So they was like, well, try to see if you can get food stamps. So I go down to the place, I tell them, look, I just got out of prison. I said, can I get emergency food aid or whatever it is? And he was like, he said, yeah, we could probably work that out for you. So they gave me like $194. So I'm like, do I get this every week? I weigh 250 pounds, right? He was like, well, you'll probably get that once a month. I said, so in the meantime, what am I supposed to do? He was like, well, you'll have a job soon, which I already knew that, but it's sort of like I see people every day in certain segments of society. This is like this one lady I know, she gets like $1,300 a month in food stamps, right? Which is just like, to me, that's like 2 or 3 months worth of food, right? And she sells it at half price. So I'm like, the Republican becomes for right? But it's just like, I see other people get advantage, get certain things that, I don't agree with it, when it comes to, the social entrepreneurship thing. It's just like, to me, I feel like a lot of money is being wasted on a lot of people that really, I don't want to say they don't deserve it because they have children, the children are innocent, but I see a lot of people misusing the system. And then you have some people that really need it. Like, all I really needed was like a good 2 months, and I was fine, because I don't have any problem with working. I only sleep about 4 hours a day. So I'm like, me, none of that. I see a girl, she just last week, she went and told me that her boyfriend beat her up. And she got all this assistance, oh, we got to protect you from him. It never happened. So I told her last night, I said, well, why do you use the system? You can tell them that your girlfriend or your boyfriend beat you up, they're gonna put you up in a hotel, they're gonna give you this housing, they're gonna do all of this stuff. And here it is, I'm sleeping on the couch paying a person $300, right? Well, I gotta do whatever I have to do. No, all you really have to do is just like go to work and save a little money here and there, and it'll work out for you. That's what majority of the society does. But that's the Republican, the Michael Steele in me speaking right now. But it's just, I just see people abuse the system. I see other people that just really, that deserve a break. I mean, it's guys that, and it's people that feel that same way about prisoners. Like, you guys got $60,000 a year or $50,000 a year to live in prison, which I don't know where the 50,000 goes. But it's just like, so I can understand both sides of the story, but I know as far as myself, like, all I need is a break, and I'm fine. I mean, Professor DeWilde, he knows I transplanted trees at his house and everything already. So it's just like, I have no problem with working, but when I look at, I'm making $10 at this job, or they try to send you to, not to say anything about Padnos because I worked there as well before, but they send you to these temp agencies, and it's just like, the temp agency say, well, we'll give you $10 an hour, and I'm just like, okay, car note, insurance, rent, I get left with $20 that I have to eat with, it just doesn't work out. Like right now, I get maybe $1,100 in workman's comp, and my insurance and my car note is $500. I was paying $300 to sleep on the couch. By the time I get done taking lunch and all that, paying for my gas and all that stuff, then I just got a letter. I got to go to child support court tomorrow because me and my wife are divorcing, so they want me to pay $235. So I told the assistant prosecutor, I'm like, okay, I know my budget very well. That leaves me $117 in the hole. I said, what am I supposed to do about that? She said, that's up to you to decide. So it's just like, to me, certain things, like then I see this other guy, he has a job, he pays $15 a month for his kid. I'm just like, how did this happen, but.
Yeah. I have a question for you. Now, it sounds like just from hearing your story, I feel like there's a lot of human error in your process.
Yeah.
Like paperwork just not getting through. And
Well,
do you think the system just kind of, is it set up for that to happen? And is it set up against
no,
those?
I wouldn't say that it's set up for that to happen because, I mean, garbage in, garbage out, right? So you can set up a model and you can put all of the variables in there and the variables work. Just like with truth, it's based upon scientific information, something that's been replicated, has been shown to be true. Mm-hmm. But whenever you subject something to human error because you're having a bad day, you decide to put this under this pile, or instead of putting it on the computer, you just set it to the side, and then eventually your coffee spills on it. You don't want your supervisor to know it gets thrown in the garbage. This is not a made-up story. I've seen this with my own eyes, right? It gets thrown into the garbage. It's like, so someone has to pay the price, and the prisoner's on the bottom of the totem pole in society, so you have to pay the price. I come from, my stepfather died that day. I was pallbearer at his funeral. I came back, I still had my suit on, and I'm just sitting on the front porch drinking some vodka and a beer. And I just see a big truck. I'd never seen a raid truck. Remember, I got locked up when I was 16. So I never seen a raid truck before. I thought it was like, not to stereotype anybody, but I see a lot of Mexicans with all the lights and all that stuff on their trucks. So I just like, man, that Mexican got a big truck. I'm serious. So, I looked at her, she was like, that's not a Mexican's truck, that's a raid truck. I'm like, a raid truck? I'm like, okay, I'm on parole, let me go in the house. Well, that turned into me seeing them and jumping up and running into the house, which they took as a sign of guilt. They was in the house for like 2 hours, and when they were leaving, they opened up the oven and there was a gun. So it was like, well, whose gun is it? I was like, I need you to tell me because I don't know. I don't cook here. I eat out all the time. And they said, well, this charges might not stick, but you're going to jail for this tonight. Because if you're on parole and if you're around a handgun, there can be a handgun in this room right now. And if the police came in and searched this room and found a handgun, I could go to prison for 5 years just for being around a handgun, right? Now, they say that they have to prove knowledge and all that, because that's legal terminology. You're going to prison, period. But so the ATF got involved and they took the DNA and the fingerprints from the handgun. And my lawyer comes in, he said, well, your fingerprints and handgun is not, fingerprints and DNA is not on a handgun. There's 2 different sets of fingerprints and 2 different sets of DNA. He said, so you're fine. He said, so we'll just go to trial. So I said, okay, we're going to trial. I went to trial and I got found guilty. Because the prosecutor did not submit that information to the court. I found the information on my own. My lawyer didn't even submit it. But because they talked about it on the transcript, I just was looking. And I'm just like, okay, I read it, so I knew what it said, but I couldn't find it, so I just went around drinking, and finally I said, okay, well, let me write the state police. And I wrote the state police, and they sent me a copy of the DNA report that said that 2 different sets of DNA was found on the handgun, and I was excluded as mandate donor to the DNA. So I started petitioning the courts, and they said I exhausted all of my appeal remedies, so, which is a lie, it just was a bunch of garbage, so I'm still fighting that now, but that's what I went to prison for. I'd never seen the gun, I never shot the gun, any of that. And I went, so you hear guys, I don't like telling the story because you hear a lot of people say, well, I'm innocent. So it's like society sort of like, oh, right, so it's sort of like, I don't like telling the story because I would rather you see me in a Porsche Panamera after I win the lawsuit or whatever, right? But it's sort of like, it does happen. I know maybe out of my 24 years, I think I've done legal work my whole time. I got maybe 7 guys released from prison. This last time I was there, I got 16 guys sentence reduction. So I know the law. I know what is and what isn't, right? So it's like, I've probably seen 24 guys out of 24 years that were actually innocent, right? But most of them had life in prison, And they went through the appeals court all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court and got denied. So now it's just like, we'll pray and hope that, something breaks. But most of those guys, but you create a bitter person. So
Yes.
this is the older white version of me. Richer as well.
Well, and also, as you heard earlier, he's probably the foremost Jewish Reformed theologian. He knows more about the Christian Reformed tradition than any other Jewish person I've ever met. Self-defense growing up in Holland, I'm assuming.
People ask me, how do I know so much about church history? I say, you can understand where I live. Church history is history. I said, so I'm going to go to that trouble for a piece of metal. Why would I throw a whole person away? And that's essentially what we were just talking about here. I mean, obviously, this person with this kind of capability. And even if you did those jackass things in the first run, there was a system that was set up to kind of encourage that kind of behavior, and then to pounce on you if you did it. So they were finding reasons to keep you instead of reasons to get away. And around this Western Michigan, not alone in this, but there's a big thing about being tough on crime. We're going to be tough on crime. That's where some of this mindlessness comes with mandatory minimums and all the other kind of stuff. But a new line is starting to emerge, even among Republicans, and say, well, let's be smart on crime and soft on taxpayers. Just a little buzz that you can use, sort of like trumped up trickle down. You can. I have people who say it's just because what we do is we want to make best use of all resources, and what you've just heard is a story of just a staggering waste of resources. I mean, just not only this person's potential that hasn't been able to be fully utilized outside, but just the expenses. Because it's staggering. So and that gets back to my point before about like why care about anything. You don't even have to care about people at all. I mean, do you really enjoy just paying all this taxpayer to just obviously misuse as opposed to paying a higher share of the Grand Valley tuition the way we used to? It's just unbelievable. So what you've gotten here is the motivation. The thing with this 70 times 7 thing, and I know there are programs in Kent County which I'm not as familiar with, but I mean the whole thing about that is to provide a network. And there used to be these cell phones ads, which, that showed the one guy with a phone and a whole network behind it. When you hire somebody through this agency that's designed to support things, you get the whole network of people that are trying to help that person get there. Now, I'm impressed that you managed to get a car coming out because, when you get, you stick someone with a $4,000 bill for this, and, it's like a judgment against them. Now you go to apply for an apartment, you got to file, put up a credit application. Well, that's not going to look too good to get a lease in your name, and then you want to get a car, and you want to get a car loan, that's not going to look good. And then, okay, so you can take public transportation to work, good luck with that, as I'm sure you know here. And don't be late for work, but then of course you're dependent on the bus, and it's completely wrong, okay, but again, it's also just such a staggering race that we're trying to do that. So, again, you're trying to wonder what we can do about it, and is one organization like this, and there are organizations here in Grand Rapids that try to leverage it. And I'll just suggest another kind of thing that's very interesting, a model that might even relate to this. Now, probably not, but in Holland, there's an organization that started called Friendship House. Did I ever tell you about Friendship House? It's designed for, there's a connection here, but I'll just quickly describe it if it's okay, because I think it's a brilliant example of social entrepreneurship. And Dean of Students at Western Theological Seminary had a problem in that he needed housing for his graduate students. Some other people, he was at church, another couple had a Down syndrome child that was getting to be in his 20s. He wanted to live on his own, and they're worried about what Michael be going to do about that. Of course, any parents with a child with a difference in their capabilities is going to worry at some point they're going to get to an age where what's going to happen if we're not here. And from that meeting after church one day, hatched this idea where they built a house that had 6 clients, and there would be 3 students, the graduate students, also living there, and each of the 18, 3 for each client. And they were assigned to figure out how to be available for whatever their person needed all day long. And they paid the same rent that they would have paid for student housing. So now we get more housing. And if you had to have social service professionals providing the services to the person, the cost would be staggering. But they're paying for to provide these services and getting a phenomenal education from this. And it was started by the right in Holland. Now that guy's gone on to Duke, and there's a Friendship House at Duke, and there have been 2 built at Vanderbilt, and there are a couple more that are in the works. It's just a burgeoning movement, and it wasn't even really my issue, but I just love the sustainability of it, because the people and the education, the power of the education that these students are getting. Again, it probably need to be probably better to be graduate students, but these are people that are going to be ministers. You could do it with people that are going to be social service professionals. One guy that did it, the experience it had, was going to be a doctor. He, in fact, a neonatologist who might very well end up delivering a child with that condition. Now he says, the way I can speak to a new parent about the hope, about what I lived, what I knew, I didn't just read about it in the book, I lived it for a year. I know about the hope that you can see, about the joy that these people can experience, and the joy that they can be shared with other people. All the I don't have to go on about that. You got the idea. I mean, so it's a very powerful model. Now it hit me with some of these things that prisoner reentry is addiction recovery. There are a lot of transitional housing is a big need. If you could combine that with possibly with graduate school housing for people especially going into the helping professions, then maybe that could be extended. I mean, that's a classic social entrepreneurship idea, and it's pretty new. So it's not like you got to be ahead of everybody else, but this kind of thing. I mean, in Holland is the first place everybody could just go there and see it, and it's being replicated around the country, again, for this particular population. But it seems like some variation on that might have promise. And then, of course, the bigger the organization gets, they can be in back, and they can provide, they can help make sure you get the Medicaid card, and and they can just kind of provide the basic surrounding umbrella of services that could be done. Anyway.
It's a great idea. I'm going to ask you a little bit about when you instituted this at Padnos, the 7x7.
Well, we just said we'll work with you.
Right.
Yeah.
Is it something you announced to everybody who worked there, or was it something you want to keep it back under the radar? In other words, you have an obligation to say, we're going to take this chance and bring.
No, well, it's not. It's not. It doesn't. I do talk about it some in the context of our kind of philosophies of making best use of all resources. But most important thing is that you've got to. There has to be an on-the-ground supervisor who really believes in it. And we were fortunate to have one in particular who I just would say, here's your chance to implement what you talk about on Sundays. This is a good example of applied religion in action. And he just got the personal excitement once he just saw that this is my he's a person that's serious about his faith, and he was able to embrace that. And then, and I just talked to him yesterday just to get ready for this a little bit, and just to see what his feelings are about how he had to then get it down to he's a superintendent, had to get it to the supervisor. There was a certain amount of skepticism at first, but once people saw the people, and I'll tell you one thing about it, in speaking to the prison, something that I've said, I mean, he's already said that, okay, so I'm Jewish and growing up in Holland, Michigan. When I was about 12 years old, my grandmother said to me that I was responsible for myself, and I was responsible for my family, and I was actually responsible for all the Jews in the world, because I was the only one most of these people were going to ever meet. Now, and that was her perspective. She wasn't far wrong, actually. Now that could be, you could take it. Some people might say, well, let me out of here, and she happened to get me at a point. She didn't really know that, because she might have oppressed someone else, but I mean, okay, I can do this, but but I would say to someone who's being given a chance, under a program like this, I don't want to lay too much even more on you necessarily, but by the way, how you behave is not just about you, but it's about the next guy that wants to check, because if you really screw up here or make it, and if you don't like it with the temp agency, you could just say, hey, not yet. I may want a chance. I need a break. I need to come back. I mean, there's no obligation. Don't leave in the middle of a shift, or don't just not show up when you think you're going to. But without a lot of lead time, we can just stop for a while. But this isn't only about you. It's about providing an opportunity for a next person. And I am okay with that. A lot of times, people that are with a kind of liberal political outlook don't want to talk about responsibilities on the part of the recipients to be good users. And when I'm teaching in the business, when I'm visiting in your business school class, I'm talking about how business people that are succeeding need to operate in a way that maintains the credibility and respect of the general population in the business system. Hey, this is working real well for you. Don't abuse it. Otherwise people are going to want to change the rules in a big way. Which is what's happening. And so similarly, someone who's getting the benefit of some affirmative step on really going on. I mean, how about a little Caddyshack? Hey, wow, a little something for the effort. It's so just. Is that the answer?
So we got about 10 minutes left. Let me open it up and see if there.
I will just say one other thing that this guy said. I just want to get this in here. I don't know. Sorry, but he just said the importance of a program like that. He just said this. What he experienced is another two things, I guess. One is that the learnings about what we should do to try to help it work for these people that are coming into this program. I said, really, shouldn't we be doing this sort of thing for any new person coming into the organization? So as you think about the best things that you can do to try to make it work for a person coming from that, really anybody coming in. Sometimes organizations can be a little unfriendly, or there's a certain amount of hazing, there's a certain amount of the new guy, or the new person, we gotta break them in or whatever it is. There's something to be done there. But the other point that this person made to me was the isolation and loneliness. One of the real obstacles to recovery successfully is the sense of loneliness, the sense of isolation. It's pretty overwhelming, and when you got no one else to go to, or if the only help you got to go to is the group that kind of led you, or I'm going to say led you, or the people that you were with when you went the wrong way in the first place. If that's the only place you got to go, it just makes it that much tougher.
It's weird that you said that. It's like what I'm going through, and that's why I got pissed off at the TV last
Yeah.
night. But it's not. I don't have a lot of negative people around me. I got a lot of positive people, but let's just say I like to have a little fun. Remy Martin happened to be one of my friends, right? And most of my friends don't participate in that. But so it's sort of like I find myself either just driving, and I'm getting like 10 miles a gallon, so I can put more money in the car than I wanted to, or I just find myself just like sitting there, just like, okay, what should I do? Like before I did taekwondo, I did my weight training, I did all of that kind of stuff. So now it's like, you know, I'm sitting in the house, I have a blow-up mattress, you know, because, you know, I'm just by myself. It really feels like I'm back in prison because that's the same exact thing
Without
that you
some
have in prison, but I'm in a
appropriate-
4-bedroom house, right? Because I got a bed and I got a TV that, you know, it has a little screensaver so I can look at the landscape, but that's it. But it's just sort of like, I really, like last night, it really hit me, just sort of like, this is like exactly what I had in prison. My underwear, my t-shirt, my socks, my shoes, a television, and, you know, a bedroom, right? So it's sort of like, now just that transitioning, you know, trying to, like, I don't even, like, my refrigerator hasn't been bleached, it's clean. And it's still clean, there's nothing in it, right? Because I haven't even went shopping yet, and I haven't went shopping yet because I haven't got plates and forks and spoons yet. I haven't got those yet because I'm like, I don't even have a skillet to cook anything yet, but I got my own house. So it's, you know, it's like a weird happiness, you know, because it shows that, well, most people in society, you know, they leave their parents' home, they leave with something. But it's like when I came back to society, I came back with a good tire, 15 books, a Bible, a Tanaka, you know, and my restaurant menu and my logo and all of that stuff. So it's like I came out with my dreams, so it's like now, how do you nurture your dreams from nowhere, you know? So I keep getting opportunities, but I don't know, it seems like the universe, you know, winks at me, but it doesn't bring the stars any closer. So, you know, it's just, I'm happy because I'm free, you know, I can do things, but it's sort of still like, you sort of feel overwhelmed still because it's like, I got friends that I can go and say, well, I need this, but I don't like asking people for things. So it's sort of like, you know, I just went over her house, and her husband was in Florida. So when her son was, she said, Keith, did you eat anything? I'm just like, did I eat today? Because it's just like, I'm always trying to work. I'm always trying to make extra money, you know? So it's just like, no. So she's like, here's some nature bars. Here's a breakfast bar. Here's your protein. I'm just like, I don't need, yes, you do. You know, because she, you know, I lived with her for like a year, her and her husband and her kids. And it's like, you know, when I got out last time. So it's sort of like she knows that I just, like every 2 or 3 weeks I pass out, I sleep to 9 o'clock and I call that sleeping late. Other than that, I'm up at 5:30 in the morning. Sometimes I go to bed maybe 12 or 1 o'clock. So it's sort of like that isolation is good at times, but at other times it can sort of lead you to saying, okay, well, I'll go find somebody else that drinks Remy Martin and Bud Light Platinum, you know, but if they happen to do other things, and now you're looking at them. I'm not doing drugs at all. It's just me. I don't like the feeling. I like being controlled. So even when I get too drunk, I drink more Red Bull to counteract. Right. So it's sort of like, just because the type of person I am, I just don't like being, you know, high and all that kind of stuff. But it's sort of like that isolation easily leads you into a situation that things can happen. You know? I almost got a couple of weeks ago in a situation that, and I was just sitting there drinking beer. We had a bonfire going, and some jackasses showed up, and the situation went pretty bad, pretty fast. You know, luckily I didn't get involved, and I just got, normally I can see something about to happen, just from being in prison so long, to be able to notice, you know, how people move, and they're not in a fit situation or a place where they normally are, their body language, so it's sort of like, something's about to happen. I think I need to get in my truck. As soon as I, boom, my front headlights came on, and it was bad. So I hit reverse. And I got out of there, but it's just like, it's stuff like that that could send me back to prison. That's why I try to avoid a lot of this stuff. That's why, to me, isolation is to my advantage at that time, but it's not always good.
Questions, comments?
You definitely had a really long road and many things that were difficult, but what did you find the hardest part about readjusting when you got out of there?
When I got out last time, I was still married. And this time I got out, my wife had a baby like 12 days before I got out. I think I found out like 20 days before I was released. So it was just sort of like, this just doesn't feel right, you know. To me, that was just like weird because I was used to being, you know, I have a son with her. You know, it's sort of like, can I be cordial in this situation when you're being talked to negatively? You know, it just, right now my mind is like my worst friend, right? Because it always tells you, no, you don't need to get out of here. But it's sort of like, you know in your heart that you still want to make sure everything's fine. But it's just sort of like, I think that, and then just looking at, I used to be very materialistic. So just like all of these clothes I got when I was like 8 or 9 years old. But It's just like looking at all of my old stuff. So like now I don't even like buying anything, but it's just like now I just look at all of my stuff because my friends kept majority of them. Just sort of like, why did I buy that? Why did I buy that? But I'll tell you the funniest story about it. Well, I'm going through physical therapy, so they got me doing a complete upper body routine, right? So I had these Avias that I bought. It was like $230 because they said they were good running shoes, right? So I buy the shoes 8 years ago. I get them like, man, these things are still brand new. I never wore them. So I put them in the garage during the summer. So last week, I wear them to my training session. So I'm walking around like, man, these are some nice soft soles, right? And so now I just see all of these little red trails behind me. And I'm just like, man, what? And all of a sudden, one chunk came out the back of the shoe. The other chunk, I'm just like, man, what's going on? The shoes fell completely apart. And I'm just like, because I left them in the garage that whole summer and they just got heat and that gum sole just came up. So I'm just like, okay, I spent all this money on these shoes and I had to throw them away. I wore them maybe 8 or 9 times. So, but like right now, I would never go and buy shoes that cost that much. So it's just like looking back now, I just realized how much money I wasted on things that, really wasn't important.
I'll give you one quick one from mine. In my 14 years working in and out of the prisons, the Michigan Department of Corrections does not seem to be beholden to anybody. I don't know who they answer to. It's a bizarre situation. They knew that I was there. We go up there every week and run the program. Some weeks we would get in, some weeks we wouldn't. Why? They didn't have to tell you. One of the guys, one of the first times I was up there, came up to me and said, let me give you just try to give you some sense of what it's like to be in here and how crazy making it is and how difficult it is to survive this and make the transition. Said an officer could come up to me and write me a ticket, literally a piece of paper ticket, disciplinary. I said, well, I'll give you this ticket. Why? Because I saw you flying across the yard. What do you mean? Yeah, I saw you flap your arms and go up off the ground and fly. I said, that's a violation of the rules in here. And you have to take the ticket. And it would count against you. So that's what it's like to be here. Through the looking glass, crazy kinds of stuff. So one of the things that we found was that people's lack of computer skills really hurt them. There's no access to computers of any kind. They have some legitimate concerns, given some of the guys about uses of the internet. So I worked with another company in town. I said, well, we can dummy. They said, yeah, we'll buy 24 computers. We can have our IT people just dummy them in terms of access to the internet. We'll donate them to the class. And I had somebody here, a colleague here, lined up who was going to go in and just teach basic computer skills so that when people got out, at the very least, they were conversant with the whole Microsoft Office suite, and they had at least that much coming in. And the person said, no, can't do it. No, won't do it. And you have to be very polite because they can just cut you off and your life is over, you're never go back. Can you tell me why? Businesses in town, we want to support this. Talent can be developed. It seems like a good thing.
They didn't come up with the idea. That's the way the MDOC operates. It's just, like I talked to you before, when we studied at the economic class and we talked about the post-production curve, with the business, you are accountable to your tax holders or you're accountable to staying in the black, making a profit. The MDOC doesn't have to make a profit. They get money. The more money they spend, the more money they can bid for. So if I'm not, like they drive around those John Deeres, $50,000 John Deeres, and at the end of the year, if there's $25 million left over in the budget, they're going to spend that money because if they don't, the following year, if they ask for $2.2 billion, they're not going to get it, which is a reason why the governor, I think he gave them $2 billion this year, but he goes back into the budget and says, oh, well, we just found another $400 million. We'll give the MDOC $200 million. But you got children here, well, kids, 18-year-old, 19-year-old, in college, just struggling to pay for college, that you could have took that money, divided it up and said, okay, here's money to help with the school. They just will not do it because they are not accountable to anyone but the governor. The governor changed it. The parole board used to be up under the governor. The governor took it and made it under the director of the MDOC. So now he's able to dictate directly to the director of the MDOC what he wants done. So if he needs 5,000 prisoners released, 5,000 prisoners will be released. If he doesn't want them to be released, they won't be released. Right? So it's sort of like
You do know his rhetoric has changed some. He's saying the right things now. It's not one huge program.
Right.
So I think some of the business folks who have his
Federal
ear,
dollars.
like Jeff, have started to convince him.
Yeah.
We don't want to keep wasting the money all the time.
But it's just like he said, like when I worked at Padnos in the material sorting house, we would have to pay extra attention to the lead weights on the tire rims. You know, we got this big bucket, right? And we'll knock the weights off and throw them in. We'll get the lead from back in the early days when they used to pour it around the cast iron, right? And we would throw it in this bucket, and the bucket would get heavy, but we knew that couldn't go back to the landfill. But you would have released a prisoner who's been on psychological medication. That's the new way of incarcerating people. Now, like, when I went to prison back in 1992, very few people, like it was almost a curse if you took any type of medication. Now, probably 80% of the population are on medication. So you just look like you're 19 years old, you got post-traumatic stress disorder, you've never been to war. I just can't sleep. You know, because they're so used to certain things in society. So it's just, right now, I think the MDOC is like the biggest leech in the state.
So I think what you're saying is that we're paying more attention to a piece of metal than they're paying to a person.
We have 1 minute.
We talked about a lot of the junior and things for a second. What were you able to hold on while you were in there? It was supposed to be 2 and it turned another 3. And initially, what were you able to kind of draw on in yourself to stay motivated? Because I feel like I would have.
Oh, I had days where a dark cloud rolled over my head and I just wanted to, because you always got, by me being, I used to have a 550-pound bench press, right? And I had a 1,200-pound leg press. So I've always been one of the bigger guys and the stronger guys and aggressive guys in prison. So I don't have a lot of problems. But you always have that little Jack Russell Terrier that, you get to the days where you just like, okay, I just really want to just, but you can't do it because you really want to go home, right? But me, myself, I'm just a stubborn individual. Like when I shot myself with the nail gun, I tried to go back to work. I actually went back to work, but the Norfolks had me. So it was like, no, you got to stay down. So it's just like me, I'm just a stubborn person. And then I stayed doing law work, so my mind was always busy. I was always thinking about the next case. And just like he said, when you just touch one person, when you have one person succeed, and like every time I get a guy out of prison or I help a guy win something legally, it's just sort of like, in prison, it's just like a pump. But for me, it just was like, okay, I know what I'm doing. I can challenge a lawyer, I can challenge a prosecutor. But I was always grooming myself for when I go back to trial on my case, right? So that was just me. I'm just a stubborn person that, semi-ignorant.
But you're an exception, though.
Yeah,
Majority
I'm
of
an
people
exception.
that get that kind of.
Well, I seen one guy.
Yeah.
I seen one guy. He didn't talk for 3 days. This dude was a strong Christian. He didn't cuss. He did the right thing. He was one of my buddies. And the court denied him. They lied. They said he did a 6500 motion before, and he never did. And I filed his paperwork for him. So he gets the paperwork back. Where I'm like, me, I'm like, no, they lied. Okay, we got him. They put their words on paper. This is what you need to show. Okay, this was wrong. This dude basically did everything but suck his thumb. He curled up in the bed and, I'm not going to child. I'm like, man, what? Come on, we gotta go work out. Man, I can't. For like 3 days, and I started feeling bad. Like, man, I was short. I had like 6. Well, I was supposed to have 6 months left at that time. But I'm just like, okay, I'm getting out. I was like, listen, man, I'm gonna make sure you're straight when I get out. Pull up stuff on the internet. Oh man, I don't care. And like, I can never be one of those type of persons that, would sit there and just, be gloomy and you have other guys that just. They drink spud juice all day, they end up getting a ulcer in their stomach, and then I'm bleeding up, just pity parties. I just never been one of those type of people. I've always been gung ho.
I got it. Sorry. Well, thanks both
I know.
for coming in.